Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the Visual Smuggler, and today we are back in Adobe Photoshop, and we are working on yet another flyer. Now, I know you're thinking, we already did a heavy metal flyer, we already did a punk rock flyer, what's left to do? Hardcore. We're going to do a hardcore flyer, and we're going to flex some creative muscle on this one and make it look really good. We're not just going to slop some logos onto a grungy background and call it a day. No, we're going to make it look good. And the flyer we're going to make today is this one for the band Hoods, who happens to be coming to Chicago soon, or depending on when you're watching this, has already played in Chicago. But what we're going to do is make a flyer where you have the band above their logo, a nice background, a couple logos, and some more info. So why don't we just dive right in? First thing we're going to do is create our background. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to start with this grungy background here that I got off Shutterstock. And right now it's horizontal and I want it to be vertical. So I'm going to rotate it just 90 degrees. 90 degrees clockwise should work. And let's bring it down a little bit so we can see what we're working with. And the next thing we want to do is bring in our next grungy layer. So I'm going to go to Open, and I'm going to choose this blue grunge layer. I want to do the same thing, rotate it 90 degrees, and we will just drag the layer, drop it onto the other image, and we can close that one. Nope. Now, it's a little small, so we're definitely going to have to resize it. So I'm just going to put it up here in the corner, and I'm just going to drag it down and make sure it's the same size as the layer below it. So we've got this image placed, and now we need to make sure that we can see the grunge behind it. We've got grunge on top of grunge. So what are we going to do? Are we going to take the opacity down? Will that look good? No, that's not going to look good. What we're going to do is play with the transfer modes, and that's this drop down right here. Currently it says normal, so there's nothing affecting the image. What I'm going to do is actually come down to hard light, and there we go. Now we can see our original grungy image kind of coming through the blue grungy image. Problem is, everything looks really bright. So what I want to do is play with layer 1 and make sure it looks proper. So I'm going to come to Image, Adjustments, Levels, and I'm just going to play with the brightness and also with the shadows. I don't want it to be too dark. We don't want to go too dark because we want to see everything that's going on with the background layer, but I just want to worry about this kind of bright spot right here. So I just want to bring it down just a little bit. You gotta really kind of finagle it. You got to play with it just a little bit so it's not too crazy, but we also don't want it to be too bright. I think right about there is going to be what I'm looking for. So we still have this hard edge going on, and then we've got a whole bunch of grunge in the middle. So we're good there. Our background is set and ready to go. Now I need to take this background and put it onto what I'm actually going to use as my main palette. So I'm going to come up to File, New, and I'm just going to make a standard size flyer. So 8.5, 8.5 by 11, 300 DPI, always. Create, and it's going to be a pretty big file, or it's going to be a pretty big image. We're at 25%. At 100%, it's pretty huge. So we're going to take these two layers. I'm going to shift click to choose both of them, drop them on there, and they are pretty huge. So what I need to do is bring them down a bit, and I'm just going to resize this real quick so that it fits into my palette. There we go. Bring that back up. All right, now this is what we are going to work on. So now the first thing that I want to do is stylize this with the photo of the headliner. We're going to put that at pretty much the top third of this flyer. And so I happen to have a photo of the band Hoods. We're going to go to Open. We'll open this photo. This is an old photo. They have changed members since then if you really want to get down to the details, but who cares? So anyway, I'm going to pull this layer on to the other one. We can get rid of that. No. And I'm going to do some stylizing. We don't want to just throw the photo in the corner and do this. I've seen designers do this before and just kind of like, okay, cool, I'll put the logo here. No, we want to make this embedded into our image. So first things first, I'm going to go to Image, and let's set this into a grayscale. I'm going to go down to black and white. There we go. And the next thing I want to do is kind of make it bluish. I'm not going to mess with the hue and saturation. I'm actually just going to mess with the opacity. And I think I'm going to take that down to about 68. You know what? Let's come down all the way to 60. And there you can see the photo kind of looks like it's embedded already, but the problem is we've got parts of the photo that are definitely bleeding over our grungy edge here. Easy way to take care of that. What we're going to do is click on that grungy edge layer. Going to come up here to my magic wand. Just click on that. While that marquee is going, we can actually come back up here and click on this layer, the band photo layer. Watch this. Just going to click delete. Boom. Now I can deselect that marquee. And now it looks like the band photo is part of that grunge in the background. But we still have this hard line going through the middle of the picture here. And you can tell it's a photo that was kind of put onto background. We wanted to have a more feathered look to it. So it just kind of fades down. You'll know what I'm talking about once you see it. A way to do this is we're going to click on the layer, create a mask, and then we're going to come to our gradient tool. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that these little white lines are surrounding the mask. You don't want to be surrounding the original image. You want to be surrounding the mask. So what I'm going to do with the gradient tool, I'm going to kind of go in the middle of the image here. I'm going to hold shift, click, and just drag and let go. You see that? Now it looks like the image fades into the background and it fits a lot better. So what we can do now is put the logo kind of here just to mask some of that, and it'll look great. Now I'm going to play with this just a little bit because I want to mask them out just a little more. There we go. So basically what I want to do is keep kind of the bust of these guys. I'm going to try one more time. There we go. So basically what I was saying is we want to keep the bust. You know, that's chest up for those who don't know what a bust is. We basically just want to keep the chest up shot of the guys. We have their faces in full view. We don't need to see what shirts they're wearing or anything like that. So the next thing I'm going to do is pull in the Hood's logo. All right, so I pulled in the Hood's logo and it looks pretty cool. Basically what we can do now is just kind of put it up here, and we've got the band above their logo, and then we were going to have all this space underneath, but something just doesn't look right, does it? We need some separation, really. We need some separation between the logo and the background. And the best way to create separation is a drop shadow. So I'm going to add a drop shadow. And you know what? I think I'm also going to add a stroke to this, but I'm going to do a center stroke. And I want to make that black just to give the logo a little more life. Let's see, inside. Yeah, I'm going to go with inside. And then I'm going to come to the drop shadow. And it's not really creating the separation we want. So I'm going to play with the distance so that it's below the logo, not kind of up here, but we want it more below. And then I'm going to play with the spread and the size to make it just a little darker. And I think I'll set this to 75. We don't want to go completely 100. I mean, we do want to have it. We want it to look like a shadow, not just like a big black splotch behind the band. And if I play with the size, I can actually change the shape of the shadow. And then the spread is basically the spread of the shadow. But we don't want the spread to be too big. We just want to change the size. And then if I bring the spread in just a bit, and maybe we'll bring the opacity up to 85. Play with the distance a little bit, bring it in. We don't want it to look 3D. We just want it to look like a shadow back there. And let's play with the size just a little bit to give it some soft edge. So that looks good. That's the way I want it to look. We've got some separation from the logo and the background, and we're looking good so far. Now let's add some more logos and some info, and we'll be out the door with this one. Now, one thing I want to show you guys that's really cool is right now I have the transform controls on. That's this bounding box, if you can see it, that's going around the image. If you want to move your image around and not see that box, you just kind of want to see where the layer is going to sit, you can just come up here and unclick show transform control. And now if I play with the arrow keys, I can kind of figure out where I want my logo to sit so that it looks just right. And I think we'll come up here. we definitely want to make sure that we maximize our space below because the whole top third of the flyer is taken up by the headliner. So that looks good right about there. And I'm going to turn the transform controls back on, but you'll see me turn those on and off when I'm trying to place logos. It's great that you can actually turn that off just so you can kind of see your final product and you're not trying to eyeball it over here in the navigator. I've done that before. Don't do that. So let's bring in the next logo, and we're going to have to do some work on this one. It is for the band Set Your Anchor. And props to these guys for having a black and white photo. That's awesome. This is going to be a lot easier to work with. And just like in older tutorials, I'm going to show you how to get rid of the background. So basically, the first thing is if we look at our flyer here, we've got, it looks like black text with some white. So it's more black with a white trim. That's what we're looking for. So here we want to change this so the text is black and the background is white. All we have to do is go to Image, Adjustments, Invert, black on white. Now we want to get rid of all this white because we're going to stylize up the logo our own way. So to do that, I'm going to go to Select, Color Range, and I'm just going to click right in the black. Click OK. And it creates that marquee. Now watch me get rid of all that white. I'm just going to set a mask. Boom. All that white is gone. Now I want to be able to drag that logo in here, and I'm running out of screen space. So I'm just going to drag the logo in, plop it on, and close that. Don't need it. So now we have the Set Your Anchor logo, and it needs to be a little bigger. It's kind of small. So we are going to definitely change the size of it. One thing you may notice is that there's the bounding box is kind of weird. There's some extra space going on here. So I'm just going to fix that really quick by doing this. There just might be an extra dot of white or gray somewhere that's causing that to happen. But all I have to do is create a marquee, and I will go to Select Inverse, just press Delete. It'll delete anything that's on the outside here from that. And then I'll go to Control D to deselect the marquee. And now my bounding box is much smaller, much easier to work with. So let's make their logo just a little bit bigger because they are the co-headliner. And we will move them up. It's nice that Photoshop actually has these guides. I keep them on just so I know that everything's centered and good to go. We don't need much real estate, between the band's logos. I mean, we can read them, but we really need to conserve space down here. Next thing I want to do is set some layer styles. Let's go to stroke, and we'll make the stroke white. And we will go with outside. There we go. So that looks pretty cool. We still want that degree of separation, so why don't we set a drop shadow? And the drop shadow was set for hoods, so it's looking a little too harsh on their logo, on the Set Your Anchor logo. So we're going to play with it just a little bit. And I'm going to come back on the spread, and I'm going to increase the size a bit. We'll come down to maybe 75. And let's play with the distance so it's not too much. It's all kind of just playing around, seeing what works, eyeballing it. You can't really go by numbers. I could tell you every single number I did. It's 75, 29, 31, 65. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the same on whatever logo you're working on. Because remember, we're not doing paint by numbers. We are doing technique. You're learning technique and theory. So I've got Set Your Anchor set, and it looks good. So I'm going to click OK. And time to put in our next band. So we're going to basically have 3 logos of the main headlining bands, but we've also got some other bands that need to be put on here. We're not going to have space for logos. So I'll show you guys how to get around that in just a minute. But let's bring in our next logo. Open, and it's the band Silverhammer from Northwest Indiana. And their stuff looks pretty easy to work on. It's black and white. So I'm going to just do a quick crop. Like that. And let's invert that image so it's black and white or white and black. And then again, we're going to go to Select, Color Range, Black. It's already chosen. Set a mask. And there we go. We just have the black Silverhammer logo. Bring it on in. And it's teeny tiny. So we need to size it up a little bit. Good news is it's a grungy font that they used for their logo, so I'm not really worried about quality loss. I'll click my pointer tool or my move tool, and we will just increase the size of Silverhammer. Really great beatdown band from Northwest Indiana. If you are into beatdown, I definitely suggest you check out Silverhammer. They are some local guys. For those who don't know, I am in the Chicagoland area, and so I actually know these guys personally. They're really good dudes and really good band. So anyway, let's stylize that logo. We're going to do pretty much the same thing we did to Set Your Anchor logo. I'm going to throw a stroke on there, and I'm going to throw a drop shadow on there. Now that drop shadow is a little much. And then come down on the size a little bit, and the spread. We just want a degree of separation. Like I keep saying, it's all about separating the foreground from the background. But I just don't want to go too crazy on my drop shadow, because you can go nuts on a drop shadow. You can do stuff like this. That's too much. We want to be sparing on the drop shadow. We don't want to go crazy with it. We just want to show just a little bit of separation. And maybe I can increase the opacity just a little bit, or a lot of it by 10. Let's go to 80. Boom. Looks good. Now, I want to make sure everything is centered. I know I said that I was using these guides that show up, but I'm just for the sake of showing you how to do things, I'm going to show you how to center all these logos really easily. I'm going to control click all the logos, and then I'm going to go to the background most layer. Not this background, that's just what came in. But anyway, this grunge layer. And then what I can do is go up to these tools right here, and they will do anything from center to left align, right align. What I'm going to do is click on this one. And you see how everything kind of jumped a little bit? It just centered everything on the page. Now you might think, oh, wait, Hoods is over to the side a little more. No, it's actually perfectly centered. It's the way it needs to be. This background here, I'm going to make it a layer and just get rid of it. We don't need that background layer. Goodbye. So now we're getting to the point where we've got a lot of layers and we need to know what's what. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the names of these layers so I know who's who. So this one is Hoods. This is Set Your Anchor. SYA works for me. And Silverhammer. Not to be confused with a Silver Bullet, which could kill Wolfman. I have a feeling Silverhammer could just injure Wolfman. Anyway, so we have a few other bands that need to be added, but we were really running out of real estate on this flyer, and we're just not going to be able to add their logos. They're local bands, and while they do deserve their due and they do deserve to be on the flyer, we're just not going to be able to put their logos on. But I'm going to show you what a lot of graphic designers do to be able to include other bands. And what we're basically going to do is put their names in a short list underneath Silverhammer. So we're basically just going to put their names in a plain font underneath Silverhammer, but you'll still be able to see that there are other bands playing. So I'm going to go to my text tool. I'm going to choose, oh, it's already chosen. I'm going to choose Babus New. Babus is the font that I use for all kinds of things when it comes to plain text. It's just a really good sans serif font. I will provide a link right now. There it goes. And let's add these last bands. The first band is Bone Stomper. I'm just going to do a dash. Next band is Heavy Down. And the last band is You're Dead. Now we can see that the font is going off the screen a little bit. So I'm going to do Control A just to select all. I'm going to go to my characters here. Let's move this guy over so we can see what we're doing. And let's change the leading. Bring that down, and I'm just going to mess with the parameter a little bit. It's a little touchy. There we go. And now we've got those on the flyer, and they're not going off the flyer too much, but I think I could bring them in just a little more. So I'm going to go to maybe 75. There we go. That really brings them in. We can still see them looking good. And for right now, let's make them white just so we can see where they are and what we're doing. Cool. Now, I do want to put a little style into this. I don't want to just throw a drop shadow on it and have white text. I actually kind of want to make it match the blue of the background a little bit. So what I'm going to do for this text layer is go to gradient overlay. And you can see I was already playing with the blue a little bit. So I added kind of almost a bluish green that fades into an aqua. And then aqua, we could actually probably make it just a little darker. I'm talking just a little bit. Okay, a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more. And we'll bring it in here. There we go. Okay, okay. And let's add a drop shadow. Oh, that drop shadow is really heavy. I think we're just going to do 65. And let's just put the drop shadow more behind the bands rather than coming off of it. We can bring that spread down a little bit. We do want that degree of separation. Again, we do want to be able to see them there. You know, we want to be able to see them off of the background because they do blend with the background. And maybe we can come up to, let's come up to 70. There we go. We can see them really well. I can read Bone Stomper, heavy down. There's a little bit messing in there, but it's okay. And you're dead. If I look here, I can see that there is that separation. A-okay, we're good to go. So let's click OK. And we've got our extra bands added. Now, that's a technique you can use if you've got a lot of bands on a show and you just can't fit everybody's logo. I know we want to put everyone's logo on a flyer. It's so cool. Look at our logo. We're on a flyer with a big band. Sometimes your flyer, your logo just doesn't fit. This is a good way of getting around that, especially if you're doing like a fest or a show that just has a lot of bands. You know, try to fit the first 3 logos on there of like the headlining bands, and then the rest of the bands you can put their names in a standard font even if it's not their actual logo. They're on the flyer. Cool. Okay, moving along. Let's get some info on this flyer and get this flyer out the door. So the next thing I want to do is put my information, but I already used my Baybus font and I kind of don't want to use it again. So really, you can use whatever font you want for your information. The thing is, don't get too creative because remember, this is the most important part of your flyer. Not only the headliner who's playing, but also the information, the thing that's going to tell people where the show is, what time the show is, how much the show costs, and if they can get into the show, if it's all ages or 21 and up. You want to make sure that is readable info, especially if you have like an address on the flyer. Make it readable. Don't use whatever crazy grunge or distorted font you have just because it looks cool. Use something that's easy to read. You can still stylize it so it looks nice, but this is information. This is what the flyer is all about, information about your show. Now, that said, okay, let me dial it back a second. You can still use a grungy font. Just make sure it's one that's readable, easily readable. Let me show you the one that I use, the one that I'm going to choose for this. It's called Viper Nora. And you can grab this off of defont.com. The link is right here. There it goes. So let's place some font. And I'm going to do all of these different lines as separate layers and then group them all together, show you how to do it. Cool. So the first thing we want is the date of the show. And that would be Saturday, May 5th. Oops. There we go. This is a font where all of the letters are always capitalized. There's no lowercase. So you actually don't have to hold shift or press caps lock. It's already capitalized for you. So we've got Saturday, May 5th, and it's hard to see, but we'll add our separation, our drop shadow in a little bit. I just want to get the rest of the info on here. The next piece of info, the show starts at 6 p.m. and it's 17 and up. So I'm going to put both of those on the same line. Let's go. 6 p.m., 17 plus. And these are really close together. So I'm just going to separate them with the space bar. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want to bring the size of that down. Oh, not that much. There, about 13.45 looks good. And I want to bring the size of Saturday, May 5th maybe up a little bit. So we've got Saturday, May 5th. And now I want to make these a little bigger again, but I don't want them to be the same size. See, here's where I'm just going to type in the number 15. Now, they might seem like they're a little far apart. So let's go in. Maybe we can take a space out between them. There we go. And I'm just kind of loosely placing them now just to kind of put everything in an area. And the last thing I'm going to put is where the show is being held. That would be Cobra Lounge, Chicago. Uh-oh. My font changed. That happens because Viper Nora doesn't have this dash slash thing. I can just kind of go like that on Chicago, set it back to go up, set it back to Viper Nora, my most recent font, and we're good. We're back in working order. Now you can see that Cobra Lounge in Chicago, the way it's placed is kind of off kilter with it. It's kind of going beyond Saturday, May 5th. And I want to keep all of that information kind of in a box together. I don't want anything going beyond Saturday, May 5th. That's the most important part of the flyer. So what I'm going to do first is make sure that all of these are centered. And I'm just going to shift click all of those and go up to this center tool here. There we go. They are all centered. Now I'm going to go back to Cobra Lounge Chicago, and instead of doing the easy way, which would be grabbing the transform and control tools and doing this, we don't want to monkey with our font like that. Let's go the adult route. And I'm just going to choose all of that. And I'm actually going to play with the leading. That's the space between the letters, the space between the digits. Bring it in just a little bit, get it where I want it to be. And then we'll take the easy route and just kind of finish it off by making sure it's all good. There we go. That way we didn't smush and stretch things a little too crazy. We went the adult route. we put on our big boy pants and we did it proper. I am going to remove yet another space from these two guys here. Bring them in. I shouldn't have to redo the centering, but it's always good to check. Again, it's this one. There we go. All right, cool. So we have one more little piece of information to put. I'm going to go back and choose Bebas because this is going to be tiny, tiny little font. So let's go advanced tickets available at ticketfly.com. Why can't I see the layer? Because it's stuck under a whole bunch of other layers. There it is. So let's Control A to select all, and we're going to make this tiny font because this is just kind of a disclaimer, and it's okay if it's not, within that box I was talking about of information. It's more of a tiny little disclaimer piece. And what I always like to do is with the link, with the .com, I like to change the color of that just so it sticks out a little bit. I'm going to use my dropper tool and just choose some of the white or choose some of the blue. It's too dark. There we go. So it just stands out a little bit. So I'm just going to shift click all of these guys and make sure they are all centered. Now, one thing I am worried about is I do have another text layer. It's the bands right here. I don't want to mess with that. So while these are shift clicked, I'm just going to go Control G, puts them in a group, a little folder. I can name the group if I want to. Let's just call it info. And that way we know what's in that group. And what's really cool now that I put all of those in a group together, I can actually use the effects controls on the group as a whole rather than going layer by layer. So if I want to add a drop shadow to this, I will just click on the group all together, drop shadow, and there we go. I'm actually really happy with the way that drop shadow looks. I don't want to mess with it. So I'm going to leave it there. We have a good degree of separation. Now we need to do a little bit of moving around things. One thing I'm worried about is this disclaimer at the bottom. It's just kind of coming off of our grunge, and we don't want to ruin that effect. We don't want to break the fourth wall. So I'm actually going to turn off my transform controls and just move that up move the information up a little bit, but we're coming up on the bands. So let's move those up a little bit. And we may need to play with their drop shadow. You know, this is graphic design 101. This is where you just kind of play around and you see what looks the best. You make it look as good as possible. There we go. Now what I might do is shift click the bands and the logos and just move them up just a little more. Make a little more real estate on the flyer. Come back to the info. I'm using the arrow keys, by the way, to move things up and down. And there we go. That looks good. Guys, it looks like we have a completed flyer and it looks pretty badass. We've got the photo of the band embedded into the grungy part. We've got the band's logo, hoods, another logo, some more bands, some info. Everything looks awesome. Maybe the last thing I would do is come to the hoods logo and I don't know, set that to 50% or 55%. There we go. So it looks just a little more embedded. We can still see their eyes. We can still see contour in their faces, but it just looks like it's even more embedded in that background. And I am really happy with this. So I think the last thing we would have to do is add the promoter. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click open. If you are a promoter or if you work with a promoter, make sure you add their name or their company name. It's just, you know, good practice. So I have the logo for Empire Productions in Chicago. You'll see me add this to a lot of the flyers I do if I do more tutorials with flyers. So get used to it. I do a lot of work with them. Transform controls, and we're just going to reduce the size of that guy. Let's move him over here in the corner. Now it looks kind of weird with the Empire just there. So what I kind of want to do is have another one over here. I'm going to turn the transform control tools off so I can see what I'm doing. I'm actually going to hold Alt and click on this and watch this. It makes a duplicate. And then I'm just going to use the guides here to make sure everything looks proper. There we go, guys. That's a finished flyer. It's ready to go. It's ready to be put in the hands of people so that they go to the show. We've got everything we need. There's really nothing else I can do but press print. So I really hope you guys like this. Definitely check out all of the bands you see here. I've tried to provide links throughout the video as they come up. And again, if anyone has suggestions for tutorials they'd like to see either in After Effects, Premiere Pro, Photoshop, anything to do with heavy metal, hardcore, hip hop, music, let me know and I will do it for you. Thank you guys so much, and don't forget to click subscribe and keep watching for more tutorials. This is the Visual Smuggler. I'll see you around.